The Scream Kings are in no way responsible for any encounters with the paranormal, extraterrestrial abductions, eldritch insanity, hauntings, curses, hexes, demonic possessions, cryptozoological sightings, or any loss of sleep that results from listening to this podcast.
This is the Scream Kings podcast. I'm Nathaniel Darkish.
And this is Max George.
Oh, hidey-ho, officer. We have had a doozy of a day. There we were, minding our own business, just doing chores around the house, when kids started killing themselves all over my podcast.
I love how you gradually started in your normal accent and then turned into a hillbilly accent.
I mean, I had to commit at least a little bit.
I think we better do this entire episode with a hillbilly accent. Don't you reckon?
Ugh. Well, those of us that can do it, yes. I've lived in the South, and that was real bad.
My accent or living in the South, Nathaniel?
Why not both?
Everyone, this is going to be quite a fun episode. If you haven't guessed, we're talking about Tucker and Dale versus Evil, and there's going to be so many giggles, I feel like, on this episode. This movie is wonderful.
Yeah, and I don't know that we have much preamble. Let's just jump on into this great movie.
No!
We got your friend!
They captured Allison!
Oh, it's some pancakes. You hate pancakes. I'm gonna make you something else.
So, Tucker and Dale came out in 2011, directed by Eli Craig. The writers were Eli Craig and Morgan Jurgensen. It's a very, classic horror comedy. When you think of horror comedy, this is one of the top ones that kind of comes to mind for me, at least.
Oh, yeah.
Essentially, simple plot overview. You have Tucker and Dale, who are very stereotypical hillbillies, and we'll kind of get into that later. They just want to go spend a little vacation together in this little cabin that Tucker inherited or bought. I can't remember 100%.
He bought. They just bought their vacation house, and they're just fixing it up because it's a little bit of a fixer-upper.
Just a little bit. And then, of course, hilarity ensues as a group of college kids also is vacationing in the same area. And some events happen where the college kids start to think Tucker and Dale are these psychopathic murderer hillbillies. And Tucker and Dale are just the sweetest, most innocent people. And accident keeps happening over accident. And there is a lot of blood and guts and gore. And it's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the main crux of the action really has to do with one of the college kids, Allison.
Chad.
Oh, no.
Sorry,
well, I'm going to talk about Allison.
Chad.
I mean, we'll get to Chad in a minute, but let's talk about the delightful college kid, Allison. So yeah, basically the kids are doing spring break stuff. They're going to go skinny dipping or whatever. And Allison is climbing on a rock. She happens to see Tucker and Dale are just in the same pond going fishing. She screams, they scream, she falls off the rock and just doesn't come up from the water. So they go save her, and they're trying to say, hey, we've got your friend, please, let's get her to help. But they just yell, we got your friend! And so then all the college kids run screaming away. Oh no, they have kidnapped Allison. And Allison, quickly learns that she had totally misjudged these guys, but very quickly all of her friends begin trying to attack Tucker and Dale and accidentally killing themselves all over the property while they're just trying to convey, no, we have your friend, please, and they start to think that these kids are some sort of suicide pact, that they want to get Allison, they want to kill her too, and then kill themselves all over the property for some crazy reason.
And then we have Chad, who's kind of the antagonist of the whole thing. He's, definitely encouraging these college kids to believe that Tucker and Dale are these evil sociopaths.
Let's just say that Chad is both his name and a great descriptor for him.
Chad is kind of the male Karen. It's very apparent in this movie. And there's this terrible backstory about this horrible massacre within these woods about a bunch of hillbillies, and the big plot reveal is Chad is also a hillbilly by blood, and it's just very satirical, very funny. So let's just kind of jump into why this movie is so good, Nathaniel. What makes it so funny?
Well, so what this movie does is it takes a very simple premise and it just like injects it with like every single horror trope that like every like maniac in the woods, hillbillies in the woods, and also like every like spring break kids getting attacked by somebody, like every trope from any one of those movies, it's going to be present in this film in a really interesting, funny, subversive way. And so, like, if you've seen any of those movies, or even if you just kind of are aware that that's a subgenre, you can enjoy this movie. You can watch this and laugh and realize, hey, they're like taking things that are horror tropes and they are just spinning them on their head, and you know, now our heroes aren't the college kids that are getting attacked. It is the, you know, alleged maniac, you know, redneck hillbillies that are obviously pure evil.
Yeah, I think what Tucker and Dale does best is it tells a story that we are all so familiar with in the horror community, and it pulls in a lot of tropes from different horror movies themselves. At its core, I think this is a comedy movie through the lens of a horror film. And there are a ton of shout-outs to classic horror movies like Evil Dead. The cabin is very conspicuously this, you know, occultish, demonic-looking cabin. It's decorated in bones and this and that. And you have your final girl. And then, you know, Eli Craig flips it on its head, and who we're assuming the antagonists are actually the heroes, and they're very likable heroes. And so it's this kind of fusion of satire and comedy through the horror genre that is just a hoot. It's a ton of fun. The acting is superb, especially by Tucker and Dale. I can't get over how well they do it, their work.
Yeah, I've long been a fan of the actor who plays Tucker, Alan Tudyk. Like I've been a big fan of him ever since I saw him in the TV show Firefly, but you know, he's done a ton of work for Disney, especially in the last few years for a lot of their animated movies. He's just a really fun, very engaging, very charismatic, silly actor who can really actually deliver some stuff with great sincerity. But I think the person who steals the show is definitely Dale, who is Tyler Labine. Hopefully I pronounced his last name correctly, but like he was one that I wasn't really as familiar with as an actor. You know, I guess he was in like Rise of the Planet of the Apes and a few other movies, but you know, for the most part, he's kind of just, you know, a guy that I hadn't seen anything else, but he was very, you know, like very sincere, very kind-hearted. Like you wanted to be friends with Dale, especially. Like he you know, isn't necessarily like the smartest guy around, but he knows lots of trivia. Like they really fleshed out these two characters in a really interesting way. And I like that Allison is also very well fleshed out. You know, they're kind of our main three heroes. But then I love that on the flip side, the rest of the college kids, especially Chad, are really just these caricatures of people, which is exactly what the film needed. You know, I didn't need to care about them in deep ways. They were there to be absurd, especially Chad. The kid who plays, the guy who plays Chad, Jesse Moss, is like I cannot think of a better performance for that type of character, because he is just so committed to being like the biggest douche alive.
Yeah, even down to like the cocky like collar being popped, but not only one collar. He's wearing two polo shirts, and both of the collars are popped. Like, every nerd out there has been bullied by a Chad like that. And so this movie is relatable not only that way, but then everyone knows a Dale. Everyone knows a Tucker, you know? They might be a little rough around the outside, but they are the sweetest and kindest people that you know. And so to throw all of those tropes into the horror genre really is a bit mind-boggling, because it works so well. And you don't only have the performances of the actors and actresses, but then the comedy on top of that. There are so many good one-liners, like our opening, juxtaposed on top of all of this gruesome gore. They're delivering these comedic lines as they're covered in blood or holding up body parts or running away from a chainsaw. Like, it just works so well. If you're looking for a good horror comedy, this show is on Netflix. Like, watch it. It's so fun.
Yeah, I love this movie, and I love that it really does commit to the level of violence and gore that you would expect out of stereotypical, you know, maniac hillbilly type horror movie. But it's all pretty much self-inflicted. One of the best moments to me is the wood chipper scene, just because.
Yep, that's, you know, my favorite.
Just because, yeah, we have this college kid who's trying to sneak up behind Tucker, and, you know, he's gonna spear him or stab him or something, and he jumps at him and Tucker is, like, just, you know, doing chores. He's just loading stuff into a wood chipper to help clear the property. And so he bends down just as this guy jumps at him, and he just lands headfirst in the wood chipper. And so Tucker tries to save him, but, you know, there's no saving him. And so what he ends up pulling out with the help of Dale is just this kid's legs. And it's just, like, so gory, so, like, viscerally upsetting, but also so funny, because it's just them, "Are you okay, college kid?" Like it's just, like, you know, that genuine shock of that kind of thing happening, and them trying to do something to mitigate the situation, but at the end of the day, like, there's nothing they can do. This kid jumped headfirst into a wood chipper, and then, you know, other kids are accidentally spearing themselves, and you know, of course, there's, like, you know, the moments of, like, someone, like, spitting blood into someone's face, like, you know, inches away from their face and stuff like that. But it's all because they accidentally keep killing themselves all over the property.
Yeah, and it takes, again, where you were talking a little earlier, Tucker and Dale are so lovable as the protagonists, and they encounter these scenes that would horrify and disturb anybody, and they approach it in a way that really makes you believe their innocence. Never once did I think, like, oh, this feels a little forced, or, oh, that's a little fake. And I think that's because of everyone's performance in this film. It just feels natural that this is how they would react in these moments, especially in, like, you know, the wood chipper. You're stunned and you're in awe, and you're holding up these guys' legs. It's so fun.
Well, and I love that like, yeah, they're always just so committed to every bit. That, you know, they're holding these legs, they're dragging it off somewhere just so they can find something to do with this, and then the cops, or the local sheriff, pulls up. And so, like, the scene is just, like, shot in a way that's, like, kind of imitating a lot of the shots that you would see in a horror movie, you know, in a typical horror movie like this, where we see the sheriff approaching, but, you know, it's shot between, basically, like, we see, like, Tucker and Dale's legs, and, like, them holding on to these, like, disembodied legs. And like, one of them holds on to those legs for way too long. Like, one of them drops it, but then the other one is still just, like, holding on, just awkwardly, while they're trying to, like, talk their way out of this situation. Like, you know, that's where that line of the "howdy ho, officer, you know, we've had a doozy of a day" line comes from. And I love that like, they really do try to explain things, and then, of course, the sheriff also accidentally gets killed. I love also that earlier on in the film, the sheriff, like, pulls him over and gives him this ominous warning, like, there's nothing but evil and pain in these woods. Like, it's just, like, every stereotype gets shoved at you, but then, like, how things play out don't feel too forced. Like, it's inherently ridiculous, but it doesn't ever cross the line where I'm like, well, I'm just like, that was too far for me.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the best things that this movie does, is it takes these stereotypes that we're all very familiar with, and it kind of turns them on its head and tells us, reevaluate this and make it funny. Hillbillies, everyone kind of has that stereotypical hillbillies are kind of these dumb morons and don't really know what they're doing. And then in this movie, it turns them into heroes. And yes, they're innocents and they might be a little dumb, but it allows us to kind of relate and cheer for them. And then also it does the same thing with the college kids, these frat boys who, probably will one day or already own hedge funds. And they're supposed to be successful and, and again, it turns them into the antagonists and really just fodder to be killed. And you're kind of like, wait, what? And then again, it does it with the sheriff of this, this is the law, this eminence that we're all supposed to respect. And the movie kind of turns him almost into a villain as well, because he's judging Tucker and Dale for being hillbillies, and he ultimately has no power to save the day whatsoever. And then Allison, like a cheerleader kind of trope, who, is a ditzy, dumb blonde, let's say, ultimately is the most human of anybody, because she can kind of see through the hillbillies and see who they are. Like, just one after the other. It's quite magnificent to see.
Yeah, and I really like that, at first glance, we see Allison. Also, the film sets us to judge Allison as just this idiot as well, of, oh yeah, well, she's just some dumb, dumb pretty blonde and she has nothing to contribute. But then you find out, like, no, she's studying psychology, she wants to be a therapist, she actually tries to, like, help them through conflict resolution, which is a hilarious scene.
I was just going to say, to be specific here, she's helping, is it Tucker and Dale and then Chad, like they all sit down at the dinner table and try and resolve their differences.
Over some tea.
Oh, it's classic. Yeah, some chamomile tea.
Well, no, it's not chamomile, but chamomile comes up as an important plot point later.
Oh my gosh, you're right. Woo!
But yeah, but I like that, at first glance, like, we too, like, reduce her down to just the stereotype, which is kind of like the point of the film. Like, if there's like a positive theme to pull out, it's basically just like, don't assume that people are just what they look like. And very quickly we get to see that Tucker and Dale aren't what we expect. But then we also, partway through the movie, learn that Allison is a lot more complicated and kind and worthwhile than what we first expect from her as well. And also, like, I like that we have that very human moment of her owning up to her, kind of like, yeah, I'm sorry, Dale. I felt, like, I instantly judged you when I first saw you, and, like, that was my bad. Like, you're a really nice guy, and I should have gotten to know you right away, but I didn't. Yeah, that was a mistake I made. Like, I like that we have that kind of very sincere moment in the film, considering that comes, in the middle of all of the gruesome shenanigans that come around it.
Well, and on top of that, to give it another layer, these two kind of have this romance going on. Like, Dale is, when he first sees Allison, is very obviously attracted to her, and she's a little leery. But then it breaks that down, and Allison gets to know Dale, and it turns into this very fluid feeling love story about how Dale is attracted to her, and she starts to become attracted to him. And in other movies, I feel like that would feel very forced or contrived. And here, I think the performances of Allison and Dale, and just their humanity, and it's almost silly to kind of get philosophical with a horror comedy such as this one, but the humanity of these two characters kind of experiencing what they're experiencing is really refreshing and feels very authentic, and I don't know, it works really well.
Yeah, it's something that works way better than it has any right to.
Right. And it makes me chuckle because it is such a comedic movie. I mean, it's about hillbillies and, a guy running into a wood chipper and someone dying of chamomile tea exposure. But at the same time, it's delivering these poetic moments of, we're all humans. Stop judging people by what they look like or how they act or who they are. Let's get to know one another. And there's power in that. And I feel like we need to make a shirt of, like, Tucker and Dale versus evil. the humanist's point of view or something.
Yeah,
just 'cause
yeah.
it feels awkward to pull such powerful meanings and, emotions from such a silly, fun movie, which is testament to what kind of a movie it is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because it isn't just a one-trick pony. And, like, interestingly enough, I'm just going to mention the other film that I've seen that came from Eli Craig, which was, kind of a similar vein of taking a horror theme and then just kind of, subverting it and making jokes out of it and stuff like that, which is the movie Little Evil, which is basically a subversion of The Omen and any other kind of Antichrist movie or things like that. And honestly, Little Evil did not work for me because it was just kind of, hey, let's take this idea and make fun of it, instead of actually like having a sincere element of, hey, I actually care about these characters, and I'm cheering for them, and I'm cheering for them to be happy at the end of the day. So yeah, like I think that is what takes this movie and makes it work when the other, other film that this same director tried to do a similar thing with didn't work. So yeah, like having these characters that we actually care about and having some like genuine themes that we can pull out from this movie actually make the humor work better because I care I care enough to stick around for all of the jokes. And it just kind of grounds the whole thing.
I would agree with everything you just said there. I haven't seen Little Evil, but because of what you've said, that's kind of where I haven't. To have that grounding in a horror comedy, I think, is very important. You look at other movies, and they don't have that. Everyone is a trope. Everyone is just fodder. Like the scary movies.
Yeah.
For example, it's all satire. There's no poetry behind anything, and it's fun to watch if you're drunk, but then it kind of loses its permanence. And so, again, Tucker and Dale, if you haven't seen this movie, you're missing out. It's a treat. It will make you feel, but it will also make you laugh a lot. And from a horror standpoint, too, there's some great gory, slasher type moments like the wood chipper. I was going to ask you about your favorite death in the movie, but I feel like this is it.
So another thing I think that works in this movie is just that like how things end up wrapping up, because kind of one by one most of these college kids have been picked off by themselves, but then kind of at the high point, this climactic moment of the film, Chad just decides that because Allison has, quote, gone a little hit or two hillbilly on him and has actually started to develop feelings for Dale and all that kind of stuff, he just goes full villain mode. And so he basically kidnaps Allison, ties her up, of course, in a place that, is just for chopping or, for cutting up logs, and she gets tied up to a log that, so she can be dramatically, like, moved towards a spinning saw blade and all that kind of stuff. But I love that, like, this kind of stand-up and cheer moment is that, Tucker has been also, he's been kind of taken out of the picture. He's not dead, but he's, severely wounded, and so now we get to see Dale become the full killer hillbilly to try to save the girl, right? And so, he puts on a welding mask and has a chainsaw and goes after Chad. But then ultimately, it is actually his smarts that allow them to win. Because, it's just like a throwaway line earlier on, but Chad says, like, oh, is that chamomile tea? Because I can't have that. That it F's with my asthma. And so then there just happens to be, like, chamomile there just at the place, of course, because, they set that gun on the mantle and then they use it real quick. Yeah, it's not him fighting with the chainsaw or anything that saves the day. It's that ultimately, Chad's coming at them and he just throws a bunch of chamomile in his face. And then that makes him fall backwards out of the building. But then also, I love that, so we have the action of that, and then we have, like, Tucker's in the hospital and he gets some of his fingers back, but one of them is obviously not his finger, and that's hilarious, and things like that. But then there's also just like this like little throwaway thing that is just like him watching TV while he's kind of, on pain meds out of his mind in the hospital. And it's just that, like, it mentions that the main antagonist basically was never found. That, like, his body, like, no body was found. So obviously he could still come back and, be a villain in the theoretical sequel, right? Like, even that trope gets played with, and I love that.
Yeah, and even talking about it, like, the whole chamomile experience I had as a con, but then after talking about the movie and going over everything, it makes sense, weirdly enough, and it's funny because we have all of these gruesome deaths, and then the main villain doesn't get his gruesome death. He dies from an allergy, and I don't know, you just changed my mind, Nathaniel, so congratulations.
Well, and I'll take it even one step further in that Dale, he realizes, or he knows a bunch of trivia, and that's kind of like one of his quirks. And so he's like, much more intelligent in remembering crazy things than he is in a lot of more book smarts. He, basically knows what makes people have allergic reactions to chamomile tea. And so he actually sees, like a powder or something. It isn't even like that it's tea, it's that there's a powder or something. And so that's what makes him use it against Chad. He's like, but it's okay, he'll be fine, as long as, we can get him to a hospital fast enough. Oh no, he fell out of the window. And so yeah, it was that, like, he was also deceptively smart. That, like, his, weird superpower isn't that he is a hillbilly, it's that he is actually much more intelligent, and, even if it isn't necessarily practical knowledge, it's, that he does know a lot more than you would expect him to know as being a hillbilly. It's, again, taking that theme of subverting our expectations of who this person is. And so, yeah, what makes him win isn't that he's a big burly guy. It's that he is surprisingly smart. So, yeah. So even that works very well because of that. But yeah, let's move into cons, though. Like, what are things that maybe didn't work as well?
There's a few things that kind of come to my mind, and I know I've written them down. If you are expecting this to be leaning towards more of the gore and the horror side of things, you'll be a little bit disappointed.
This is a comedy film made for horror fans. It's not that it is a comedy film that works if you aren't a horror fan. I think otherwise you'll just be like, man, this is, like, too much. It would just feel so over the top if you aren't familiar with those tropes and familiar enough to appreciate, oh, this is what they're doing here. Ah, that's hilarious.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Nathaniel.
Yeah, if you're coming to this expecting this to be kind of, an even split between horror and comedy, yeah, you're not going to be as satisfied. But you have to be a horror person to, I think, enjoy this movie.
And then also another thing that really kind of hits me is the pacing sometimes feels like it comes in and then it comes out. There are moments where kind of the action and the plot are very well developed, I think, and then there are these kind of standalone moments where, while it's still funny, I kind of start myself realizing, like, let's move along, let's go back to the plot, let's keep the movie going. It wasn't so ubiquitous that I was annoyed, but it did definitely feel like there were ups and there were downs.
Yeah, I think there were definitely moments where, maybe a scene of us kind of seeing Tucker and Dale's friendship being developed goes on a little bit longer than it needed to, or that we get to see all these college kids talking to each other for maybe slightly longer than we needed to. But even then, yeah, like, I would say as far as having pacing issues, it was a lot better than it did. Again, it has really any right to be, because I feel like so many movies would show us those things for that much longer. Little Evil, it has I was bored during like half of Little Evil. Well, this movie kept me pretty engaged throughout. There are a few lulls, but as a whole, they were not as bad as they could have been by any. So you have down that you can kind of watch it once and then you don't really necessarily need to rewatch it.
Yeah, you talked a little bit earlier about how this is one of those movies that you can just kind of put on and watch and always be entertained. And I recently rewatched this, and I get it, but I also, I don't know, it's funny, and I think it has longer rewatching capacity with friends. Watching it alone, just kind of in my house, after seeing it, it was just kind of like, yeah, this is fun, but yeah, maybe I should watch something else, you know?
Yeah. I will agree with you there. I feel like it's one of those ones that it's really fun to show to someone who hasn't seen it, especially if they're a horror fan. It's really fun to watch with friends and make and laugh at the jokes together and stuff like that. But yeah, this one doesn't hold up as well in a solo watching it setting. I still I rewatched it by myself, which is probably the only time I've ever actually watched it by myself, to prep for this episode as well. And like I had a great time with it, but I didn't love it as much as I usually love it. So yeah, I definitely think that this is one of those ones that it kind of relies on party energy of watching a movie for it to really work.
The other thing that kind of just bugged me, and it's kind of a silly thing to be bugged about, but at the very beginning when the sheriff is pulling over Tucker and Dale, there's a lot of kind of gay references, gay humor being played here, and I know it's kind of a product of the times, but it felt like they were making fun of being gay, and as a queer individual, that was kind of like, can we be done with this? And within context of the movie, it made sense of what was happening. But again, I think it's just an old joke that needs to be retired.
Yeah, it definitely is very 2010. I would say, even in 2010 when that kind of joke was more acceptable, it really is like one of the like least funny jokes in the film regardless. So like I don't know. Yeah, it was just weak writing. It was just like, oh hey, like they're afraid of being seen as being gay or something, and it just I don't know, dumb.
Yeah, it kind of is the same to me as like potty humor nowadays. Like it just is very low hanging fruit. And after, talking through all of the good things related to the stereotypes that this movie does, seeing this, like, oh, all of these stereotypes, let's flip on their head, except the gay one. It was just a little lame. But anyway.
But let's roll our eyes and move on.
So Screams and Crowns, Nathaniel, what do you give this?
Okay, so Screams wise, I'm gonna give it a 2, just because there are some surprising moments, I'll say. But yeah, really, it's mostly just like, hey, it's a 2 because I don't usually see this much gore in my comedy films. But it's not a scary movie by any stretch of the imagination.
And I rated it the same. I gave it a 2. The only thing that would make this scary to someone, I believe, would be the gore. Other than that, it's a comedy movie.
Yeah, if you just can't stomach gore and you find gore frightening, then yeah, you're gonna have a hard time with this one. But otherwise, it's not scary at all.
As far as crowns go, I kind of want to. I started out rating this movie at like a 6.5. And then as we talked about it and kind of remembered the great moments, I bumped it up to an 8. And I think that is kind of testament to one of the cons of this movie is, I don't know, there are a few movies out there that when you're talking about them with friends, you start to remember how actually funny they are. And this goes back to kind of the rewatchability of this movie. The more you talk about it and remember those funny slapping moments, you remember how good it actually is. So I gave it an 8.
Yeah, I also give it a solid 8. Again, yeah, like there are a couple of places where it could have been a little bit stronger. But as a whole, like, this is one of my big go-tos for horror comedy. I would say it isn't, like, as successful as something like What We Do in the Shadows. But I really love this movie. I do watch it, probably once every other year at least, because I find someone that I can show it to.
I feel like we need some sort of bell or announcement or celebration when we have matching screaming crowns, Nathaniel.
Yeah, that like never happens.
It's true. It's a magical moment.
Yeah, 60 episodes in, and that's happened like 3 times.
Yeah, so ring the scream alarm.
Well, should we keep the humor train going? Because I have the Uriel game for you.
Well, I am 2 for 2 for this game, so bring it on.
Let's see. Well, we've done it three times. So you've gotten 2 out of 3. Let's just be clear.
Oh,
I did trick you once.
Shush. We're not remembering the fail. We're only remembering the wins.
Yeah, we've only done it twice.
All right, let's hear it.
Okay, so the theme this time is the farm.
Oh,
Our
great.
first film is from 2006. It is called Black Sheep. Not to be mistaken with the Black Sheep starring Chris Farley and David Spade. This Black Sheep has an overall rating of 5.8 out of 10. An experiment in genetic engineering turns harmless sheep into bloodthirsty killers that terrorize a sprawling New Zealand farm. And our review gives it an 8 out of 10 and refers to it as sheer terror.
Oh, no.
At first blush, it reads like an SNL skit that the writers decided to not use at the last minute. Really? A murderously genetically altered sheep on a rampage? But it surprisingly works. Okay, then our second film, from 2015, is Llamageddon.
Oh, no. No, don't even. No. If this is a movie, I need to see it.
The overall rating is 4.3 out of 10. And the description is: a killer llama from outer space lands on Earth and brings death and destruction to everyone in its path. The review that I found gave it a 3 out of 10. And it says that it is awful, but hilariously awful. This is the best worst movie I've ever seen. I enjoy glob-awful horror movies, but this takes the cake. The acting, the spaceship made of a horse trailer and tin siding, the 6+ shirts that the black dude wears during one party. I can't tell if this is a parody or not, but thank you for the horrendous. Everything that brought me so much laughter. Let's not forget the multiple times that the actors clearly broke on screen.
I cannot stop giggling about the fact of an apocalyptic llama. If you made this one up and there's not a real movie, I'm going to be furious.
You haven't heard the last one yet, though, because if you liked Llamageddon, get ready for Alpacalypse.
Oh.
2013.
No. Why is this a horror subgenre that I just have not discovered yet? Like llama and alpaca themed horror?
You know it. And at least one of those is real, if not both of these. That's the nature of this game.
God.
So the overall rating for this one is 4.1 out of 10. And the description is: on December 21st, 2012, the Mayan predicted end of the world occurs in a way that not even the ancients predicted. A plague of evil alpacas descend on human civilization after emerging from ancient Central American ruins. The review gave it a 4 out of 10. It said, look, it's not good, but they did make the killer alpacas look pretty decent, and they were more convincing than most of the actors. Okay, so is the movie that I invented Black Sheep, Llamageddon, or Alpacalypse?
Okay, I loved the description of Llamageddon so much that it is immune. It has immunity for this competition.
Okay, so that
So
one
it is
has to be
between
real.
Apocalypse, Alpacalypse, oh my gosh, or Black Sheep. I don't know if our listeners know, but back in the day, back in junior high and high school, I wanted to be a film director, and I made all sorts of ridiculous films with my siblings. And one of them...
And our friends.
Oh, yes. But one of the very first ones was called Black Sheep. So in honor of that, Black Sheep has immunity, Llamageddon has immunity. I'm going to have to go with Alpacalypse. Jesus. I did not think today I would say the words Llamageddon and Alpacalypse, Nathaniel.
Well, you got it right! I did invent Alpacalypse.
Oh, 3 for 3.
3
Well,
for 4.
3 for
Let's get
4.
it clear.
We need to cut the bullshit and watch Llamageddon as soon as possible.
Yes, though I do have to share a little tidbit about Black Sheep, which I haven't seen, but apparently some of our friends have seen. Apparently there is a scene in which one of these genetically altered, bloodthirsty killer sheep engages in fellatio with a farmer.
Oh, of course.
I just had to throw that out there, that is a scene that you can see with your real eyes.
Well, bestiality.
But I definitely want to see Llamageddon as well. And I'm kind of sad that Alpacalypse is just an invention of my own brain, because I kind of want to see that one too.
I feel like it is the natural successor to Llamageddon.
Oh, I did say that it was earlier in terms of time, because I had to tie it to the 2012 thing, because of course I did.
Oh, that was amazing. And now I have purpose in life.
Yes, so... See, I'm turning you on to these B movies because Llamageddon exists, and so we must watch it.
We must watch Llamageddon. That is the one B movie I'll give you. And I think I said that for the last... I know, I was just going to say I said the same thing for Velocipaster.
Which we still need to watch.
True. All right, Nathaniel, besides making hysterical movie parodies, how are you staying spooky?
So I have been staying spooky just by reading a bunch of horror books lately. The one that I'm going to highlight right now is the one I'm currently reading, which is an upcoming book by Josh Malerman, who, among other things, wrote Bird Box. That's probably his biggest success, of course. But the book that I'm reading by him that is about to come out, I got my hands on an advanced copy, is one called Goblin. Which is 6 novellas set in like a town called Goblin, and it's just a lot of fun. Like it kind of takes on multiple types of horror. I would say it doesn't ever take itself ever too seriously, but it delivers some fun. It's some creepy moments, things like that. I've been having a lot of fun with it, so definitely worth checking out when it comes out in a couple of months. So. Yeah, Goblin by Josh Malerman. How about you? How have you been staying spooky?
First and foremost, we'll have an entire episode about the movie Saint Maud. I don't want to say too much about it, but Max loves that movie.
I'm very excited.
To be continued. But 2 other things that I've been doing. I started a new book by the one and only, I can't remember his name all of a sudden, Adam Neville.
Okay.
It's called The Reddening. If you guys have watched The Ritual on Netflix, that actually is a novel, as most movies, by Adam Neville, and it was a fantastic read until the end, when it pooped the bed, as Nathaniel would say.
But the movie did not poop the bed.
Yeah, it's one of those rare instances where the movie is actually a little bit better than the book, in my opinion. However, he just released The Reddening. It came out in 2019, I guess, so not just released. I'm just hearing about it, and it is about kind of a group of Neanderthals, kind of primitive people who have been living in the mountains for millennia, I guess, and they've kind of evolved into these kind of bloodthirsty killers. And a reporter, of course, goes to the city because all these people are mentioning seeing these monsters, and I'm not too far into it. It's not terribly scary at the moment, but it is intriguing. So I will report once I finish the book.
Awesome. Yeah, I've read a number of Adam Neville's books, and as a whole, I've quite enjoyed them. Again, I didn't love the end of The Ritual, but I loved the rest of it. So I do have to say, I'm going to give a shout out to his book Last Days, which is like about a cult. That one was real fun. Had some real good creepy moments.
I need to check that out. I sure love cults, as you know.
Yep.
2 other things that I want to mention. The first off is a little shout out to my kiddo. She is obsessed with these 2 movies on Disney Plus called Zombies and Zombies 2. It's essentially a High School Musical, but for this generation. But it also has zombies and werewolves, and I was just really proud of my child for embracing something within the horror genre that also has some really catchy songs. The last thing is I've started listening to a really awesome podcast from one of my favorite actresses right now on TV. It's called True Crime and Cocktails. It has Lauren Ash, and she plays Dina on Superstore. She commented on our Screen Kings Instagram a few days ago after I gave her a shout out, and if you like true crime and you enjoy documentaries, check them out. They essentially are detectives. It's baffling how much research they do on these cases, and the additional information you learn on their episodes is really, really impressive. So again, if you like true crime, if you like horror documentaries, check them out. That's kind of their shtick. They'll review an episode of Unsolved Mysteries or The Night Stalker on Netflix, and then they'll do a whole episode about it where they dive into what else happened and what the documentary didn't tell you.
That's awesome. I'll definitely have to check that one out.
I was just going to say, also for our listeners, fans of Scream Kings, we have some really exciting and big stuff coming up, so definitely keep your eye on our social media pages. We have some incredible people who are going to be guests. We're still trying to work out the calendar there. We have a really fun episode coming up all about exorcism, and if you know who I am, I'm very excited for that.
And not just exorcism from different religions and cultures around the world. That's right. We're not just talking our normal Roman ritual Catholic exorcism. We are going to be talking about everything exorcism. It's going to be real cool.
It's going to be awesome. I'm so excited. And then we also have a really big announcement, but we are not at liberty quite yet to tell you about that. But I do want to create the suspense and say definitely keep your eye on our show. We've got some cool things coming up.
Yes. Yeah, big things are happening with the show. So it's a great time to continue to listen. It's a great time to be hosting the show. So I'm very excited to see what the future has to hold. I'm excited to roll some of the stuff out for you guys. So just, keep an eye out. We'll be announcing stuff, of course, on the show as well as on our social media very soon.
And all of the stuff that we are talking about would not be possible without our incredible fans. Because of your guys' interaction with us and listening to the show, these exciting things that are forthcoming are because of you. So thank you for taking an hour out of your day to listen to two goofy friends talk about horror.
That kind of wraps it up for this particular episode. I guess we're a little bit under our hour mark today, which is great because we sometimes go over. So I guess to everyone out there, just have to say, stay spooky.
Stay spooky.
Need even more Scream Kings? Here's our obligatory shameless social media plug. Follow us on Twitter or Instagram at ScreamKingsPod. You could also email us at screamkingspodcast@gmail.com. Help us reach a wider audience of horror fans by leaving a review on iTunes or by sharing a link on social media. You can also support the show by going to patreon.com/ScreamKings. Stay spooky.